afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Apologies for the slightly late start. We've got a slightly unorthodox and innovative setup going on here with GoToWebinar. It hasn't done as we expected. But anyway, we will push on. So hi, I'm Alison Fenner and I'm Executive Business Advisor at IAB Europe, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for today. In today's webinar, we're going to explore the results of our ADEX Benchmark 2017 report, where we give you the definitive guide to digital advertising in Europe. So we're going to give you some background on how the study's put together, then look at the big picture, the evolution of the markets, and the key trends across the different formats. We're going to spend about half our time doing that, and then we're going to spend the remainder of our time having a panel discussion. So the report's available on our website, iabeurope.eu, and in all we'll spend about 50 minutes with you today, if that's okay. Feel free after the event to share the webinar with your colleagues, and we'll make the recording available and tell you where that is. So a bit of housekeeping to start with. You'll see a chat panel and a questions panel on the right hand side of your screen. You can submit technical queries through that chat panel, and questions for the panel in the questions panel as well. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, who is Daniel Knapp, Executive Director TMT at IHS Markit. He produces the report for us in collaboration with the IABs across Europe. After his presentation, he's going to be joined by Christiana Carlet-Stagno from Oath, Stefan Rangelovic from Group M, and Tyson Piercy from Newbase. So we're delighted to have them with us in the webinar today, and they're looking forward to a stirring conversation when we get to the panel. Okay, so now without more ado, I'm trusting in our system and handing over to Daniel. Over to you, Daniel, to take us through the results. Daniel, I think you're on mute. If you want to come off mute, if you are able
Fantastic.
to.
Here we are. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here again and give you a whistle-stop tour of the ADEX 2017 study. We have 27 markets participating, as you can see here on this map, and this is around 98% of the entire European market. As you can see clearly, we don't define Europe as the EU, but have a more expansive definition, and really incorporate a broader definition of Europe here. To give you a big picture view, the European digital advertising market in 2017 was worth 48 billion euros. That's as much as around the GDP of Serbia, and it would be around the 82nd largest country in the world, according to the OECD, if this was a country. Remarkably, we've had a double-digit increase in the market of 13.2%. We're going to come to this in a second. It's remarkable because it's a very stable growth rate over the last couple of years, and despite the maturity of the market, this growth has not slowed down, on the contrary. If we look at the evolution of the study, we can see that since the first study in 2006, when digital was really a nascent market, 6.7 billion worth, like for like, we've really had an explosion of digital, and the market has added nearly 42 billion euros in those years, which is more than the worth of the entire television advertising market in 2017. Remarkably, even in the last 5 years, the market has doubled in size. So we see continuous growth, and despite the recession that we had in Europe in 2008 and 2009, plus the double-dip recession in 2012, there wasn't a single year in which digital advertising has not grown. If we look at the trajectory of digital also in context of all other media, there are a few remarkable things to be observed. First, we can see 2007, we had the peak, if you will, of traditional media, that's non-digital, everything TV, radio, print, out of home, cinema, and so forth. And digital was largely an add-on to that. We've had jointly, all media together, a historical market high of 111.6 billion euros in 2008, which we haven't really reached for a long time after. Indeed, we saw a complete collapse of the market in 2009 with a historic market low in the years of the study. Then it had a period where there was a flat market, really. The ad market in Europe did not grow at all. And there was mainly a redistribution going on between traditional and digital. As you can see clearly, that year by year, the share of digital increased. And then we moved, starting from 2015, from this flat phase to an overall growth phase of the market, where digital, as non-digital traditional, was flat or declining actually in share, and also in total market value, was driving the market up. So for the first time, we saw digital offsetting the decline of other media. And then now in 2017, with a new market high, 5.5 billion added versus the previous year, and a new market high compared to what we had previously in 2008. Remarkably, as I said, all this growth took place in a period of fairly stable rates. We had a few spikes previously. Of course, digital was a nascent market, very strong double-digit growth, up to 58% really in 2008. Then in the recession, dropped below double-digit. The only year in the entire study where it dropped below double-digit, but it was still growing due to the measurability and the performance-based nature of many online formats. And then since 2012, we had a completely stable growth phase. And actually, 2017 saw the, well, just a small margin, but still the highest growth rate over the last 6 years. There was merely a 1.6 percentage point variation between the lowest growth over the last 6 years in 2012 and 2017. Let's not delve deeper into the markets themselves. So what happened inside those 27 countries that we are tracking? Let's start with the top 10. There's been a very stable top 10 ranking over the last couple of years. Only a few fluctuations. We saw Sweden move up, Netherlands and Spain were trading places and just moving down slightly. Overall, we can clearly see the dominance of the UK in the market, which is 2.4x the size of the next biggest market, Germany, and actually as big as the next 3 biggest markets combined, which is remarkable, but it also shows the potential that is still available in those other markets. Germany, with a population around 20 million larger than the UK, has a digital market that is much lower. So you can see how the development of broadband infrastructure, of mobile signal, of getting publishers and advertisers mobile ready and so forth, can all drive the market and close the gap. So at the one time, of course, there's a staggering size of the UK, but it also shows how far other markets whose structural economic indicators are quite good could really still grow, and how underdeveloped they still are. At the same time, though, you can see that apart from this top group, some markets starting from Sweden onwards, from Sweden down to Spain really, markets are fairly similar in size. So the markets 6 to 9 really are extremely similar in terms of size and structure. Remarkably, though, despite different overall sizes of the country. If we move further on to have an overall perspective, we can clearly see that there's a long tail of other markets behind those top 10. And the top 10, they command more than 50% of the entire digital market in Europe. But the other markets are growing quite strongly, usually double the rate as the mature markets. Indeed, we can see that growth was driven by not just the emerging markets, which we have in CEE, for instance, very strong growth here, but also Nordic markets, which are mature markets that are still growing, and also the UK is also growing just slightly above the European average, where you have some markets like Italy, Germany, Denmark, Netherlands are trailing behind the European average. Interestingly, Denmark, a very mature market, whereas Germany and Italy are still trailing behind slightly in terms of maturity. It's something that you can see here. As an analyst, I always like bubble charts. You see here on the x-axis, this is the maturity of the market in terms of online ad spend per capita, and you see on the y-axis the growth rates. This was the year 2016, how markets were positioned. The bubble size is the size of the market. And if you just fast forward to 2017, the last year of the study, you can see a fairly similar picture. Markets structurally haven't changed much, but you can see how one group, the UK, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Switzerland, have further separated from the rest of the pack and moved really, really ahead in terms of market maturity. If we put some grid over this, you can see that remarkably, it's those markets, in particular Norway, Sweden, and the UK, which despite their maturity, which online ad spend per capita expresses, are growing slightly above the European average. Of course, you have, if you look on the left side here of the chart, you also have the emerging markets growing above the European average, but you also then have a group of markets that are very strong in Europe, which are trailing behind growth, behind European average growth, and have so for the last couple of years. That's, for instance, Italy, France, and Germany, where structural changes have to come to the markets to really lift them up to their potential. So overall, there are kind of three groups to be observed. There is on the very right side the kind of mature yet growing markets, driven by massive budgets moving online, by programmatic, by measurement, video, and so forth. You have on the very, very left side in blue here, the emerging markets. Many are growing, but others also have some structural or cyclical issues. And you have this group in the middle of very strong European nations, which kind of still have to unleash their potential when it comes to the digital growth. If we delve into the formats here, we cover different formats in the study. We can also see some significant and interesting trends. We split the study in three formats: display, classified and directories, and search. Display also includes video. We saw display growing slightly stronger than everything else. This is a trend that has been the same over the last couple of years. Search still strong, classified and directories a bit slower, mainly because classified sites are themselves moving their business models towards display ads. And we can see around 2.5 billion of net additions in display and around 5.5 net additions, billions of euros in total. Increasingly, all spend is mobile. If we look at the composition of display, we can see a major leap ahead of mobile, when now 42% of all display ads, including video, are display ad spend is mobile. Search slightly behind in terms of spend, but search is slowly closing the gap. In particular, we can see on Google around 60% of search is, or of queries are done on mobile, but monetization is lagging slightly behind as the rates are lower on mobile, but this gap is slowly closing. So we'll see over the next 2 years, very likely the search spend and search volumes to equalize. If we look in more detail at the display format, we can clearly see the importance and the power of video. When 2016, video was 9.2% of the overall pie, and in 2017 it was double digit for the first time, 11.0%, where the non-display proportion, the non-video proportion of display was actually decreasing in terms of share. If we delve deeper into video, we can also see the real dynamics behind it. Video is now 27% of all display, and it grows around 4 times as fast as non-video display at around 34.8% versus 8.9% for non-video display. For the first time this year, we also provided more granularity, more detail on our online video figures. And we split out outstream and in-stream video to take account of very different dynamics within this format. And we saw a significant growth, an explosion of growth in outstream, nearly 74% year on year. And versus in-stream, it was just growing single digit. And we saw a historical shift happening from in-stream dominating still the share of video with 58% in 2016, and really outstream overtaking in-stream here. We've just seen that outstream here includes in-feed video, so it's everything from Facebook, Instagram, Teads, and so forth. And all these forces combined really pushed the rise of outstream/in-feed video. Video now across markets, as mentioned earlier, is around 27% on average, and we can see some leading markets. The UK is leading, like in many other categories, but Italy, which has been growing below European average in general, has a very strong share of video share of display. Ireland, Switzerland, France stand out, and even Croatia as the only CEE market. For the first time in this study as well, we looked at social, the key driver of display, and we can see how important social is as a component of the overall display segment. It was around 1/3 last year, and it's now nearly 42% in 2017. It added 7 percentage points to its share within 1 year, which is extremely fast. So overall, when we look at the growth dynamics within display, the most diverse category that we track in this study, we can see there's a trinity of social, mobile, and video, and that outside of those categories, growth really didn't happen, but that within those categories, there was tremendous growth to be found. And with that in mind, I would like to thank you and head over to Alison and our panel to discuss the implications of these numbers for the water ecosystem.
Thanks very much, Daniel. That was a great introduction to the figures. Perhaps we could kick off the discussion just coming back to you briefly to talk about why this report is so important for us as a digital advertising industry. What does it enable us to do?
There are several components really. First, of course, Europe is a very heterogeneous region where not only technology but also market culture vary. And this study is the first and the only one that really harmonizes spend and measurement across European countries. So it's the only study that provides you with a like-for-like perspective where you can compare one-on-one the UK with Poland, Czech Republic with Italy, and so forth. That of course helps to benchmark markets and see where do they stand, where are growth hurdles, what are success stories, and so forth, and enables other markets to copy recipes for success, to leapfrog certain stages in development, and so forth. I think another component is that it provides a wonderful policy perspective as well. It's in particular in times of GDPR and other hot political issues, it really is the foundation for discussions around digital single market, around data protection, and so forth. Lastly, it provides buyers with a comprehensive perspective on the European market, whereas in particular when they're used to the US as a very large comprehensive entity, buying across Europe 27 markets seems difficult, but this study is one tool to really understand and unearth where is growth, where's potential, what markets should try to invest in, how much, and it really shows with all IRBs working together on this study that despite the 27 markets and its fragmentation, Europe also is an entity with different players and countries working together to provide standardization and measurement.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough the collaborative effort that that it requires to bring the study to life each year, both from the IABs in terms of them submitting the data to us, but also underneath that, all of the work that goes on from IAB to IAB across their members. So perhaps can we come to Tyson now, and just if you wanted to give us your thoughts on what innovations and key trends have driven this growth, Tyson. I mean, at Interact, we led with the headline that the market's doubled in size over the last 5 years, and that's quite astounding, really, if we think about that. So do you want to give us some thoughts on the key innovations that have led to that?
Yeah, of course. I think it's fairly punchy coming out with a statement like that, but it's a realistic thing. And for me, it comes as absolutely no surprise. I think if we look at how people are consuming information, how they're sort of seeking or finding their entertainment these days, it's bound to be within the digital environments. And we just think about what we do as individuals and how we go about our daily lives, whether it's on whatever device. And I'm not going to get down into day in the life type scenario here, but I think marketers, strategists, as well as buyers are simply using logical media executions now to reach consumers. There aren't the constraints or the questions, I don't believe so, that were as in place initially. So I think we're getting to a better understanding of how to use mobile more effectively. And as such, there's higher investment in digital. So couple that with the increased focus on digital content creation and more effective video distribution, you're able to have a clear explanation of how this is shaping up. I also think having the ability now to use data in a much more effective and targeted strategy is also key for a lot of buyers and strategists and planners and brands directly in identifying who we believe our key target audiences are. But not only that, I think the data execution is now starting to open our eyes up to the fact that we can invest more in digital, because we're now finding that it's not just Paul, Mary, and Mohammed who are our key target audiences. This is expanding into other areas where we're going outside of what we felt was our comfort zone.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Just on that point about marketers really taking full advantage of mobile, you know, we've had this of kind of digital broadly. I just wanted to home in on mobile and just see what your thoughts are, Daniel, on how marketers are evolving their use of mobile these days, because that's one of the big stories from the report this year. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We've clearly seen in the study how important mobile has become, but at the same time, I think we're also seeing a concentration of outlets on which mobile ad spend is concentrated. It also varies a lot between markets, and some of the obstacles that we see is that marketers' websites often are not really mobile ready yet. So when it comes to linking back traffic to their website or for e-commerce, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So just on the piping, on bringing back users from the ad to their own websites, I think once that is being fixed, you know, really the purchase infrastructure of mobile will see even stronger growth. Having said that, all the data that we look at in each of the 27 markets, it's evident that there is no growth without mobile. And increasingly, this isn't just for static display, but that also includes video. In video, I think it's remarkable to see how content strategies and production approaches change, with new formats being developed specifically for mobile consumption that are shorter, have different story arcs, and so forth. So it's just not just about mobile ad spend, it's really about a mobile mindset that drives everything from e-commerce to website to content production and user journey. And once all these things are combined and integrated, we'll see an even higher share of mobile. The drawback is that so far, as I said earlier, there is a concentration of mobile spend on fairly few players. And both publishers and advertisers, I think, have to work harder to ensure that the benefits of mobile are enjoyed in the wider ecosystem.
Yeah, so there's still a fair bit of homework to be done there. And I think, you know, one of the things that we try to do as IAB Europe is to make sure that we are constantly providing examples, case studies and best practice so that people can share and learn in terms of taking advantage of those opportunities with the different formats. Perhaps it's time to take a look at the smaller and CE markets to see how they're moving in order to drive growth, and maybe there's some leapfrogging going on, or examples we can learn from them. So Christiana, would you be able to give us your view, because you've got a bird's eye view with your responsibilities of a lot of markets across Europe. Do you have any thoughts on how these markets are achieving high growth figures, and some of the innovations they've been able to implement?
Sure. From my experience, having had a look at work with those markets for many, many years, I think that in the past, when the ad buying was mainly driven by premium buying, those markets did really struggle to have a voice and to play a relevant role, because the budget that were needed to play a role in the bigger picture were probably too competitive for those markets. Now the entire ecosystem is moving towards programmatic, and I really like what Daniel said at the beginning about Europe is so diverse, but at the same time is so similar, because those markets are actually, jumping now on a cycle where markets like UK or any other mature market have lived, 5-6 years ago. So now with programmatic becoming more and more relevant and more predominant in the ecosystem, those markets are really able to take advantage of the growth that is coming from that area. Together, in my opinion, from native advertising. Native advertising has been a huge success for us, and huge area of growth in those smaller markets. And then I think Sweden, for example, is a completely different story, because we are talking about a mature market, that a market that is bigger in size and reach compared to the others. But I think what is very, very peculiar for the Swedish market is there are a lot of big brands present in the market, like H&M, IKEA, Momondo, King, Volvo. Those are all big brands that don't only spend in their local markets, but they spend across the region, and sometimes even globally. So I think, at least from my point of view, from the business I run in Sweden, the growth has mainly come from these big spenders that are really, spreading budget across the globe.
Thanks. Do any of the other panelists have a perspective on that in terms of the growth across the markets?
Yeah,
it's
Steven.
Oh,
Sorry, go ahead first.
It's Tyson here. So I think it's interesting. I'm going to sort of try and combine what Daniel was saying along with the last point here, because I think there was something really interesting that sort of struck me a couple of years ago when I was fortunate enough to be working in the Irish market. And at the time, it was pretty punchy, to be honest, and I use that term again, but it was basically, they were shooting a TV ad, and for this insurer, they basically, standard 30-second spot. Now they shot the TV ad. At the end of it, they thought, right, okay. They went to the actors, gave them a quick script, which was, I think, probably 10 to 15 seconds. And they said, look, this is for our digital media side. So we need you to do this. We're only going to give you 2 chances to do this. And the actors, basically, good for them. They nailed it on the first try. But it just shows that there's a complete change in mindset now, because I think going back and looking at that maybe 5 years ago and thinking, that's amazing. You know what? They actually gave the actors enough chance to do something for digital and for mobile. Whereas now I think if we look at any of the smaller or not as big markets across Europe, if we look at in the UK, it is a digital approach, and this is real digital mobile approach, and this is what I'm really enjoying right now. People are becoming more switched on. They get it, and it's just part of our everyday life. So that was it, and I think for me, that's just the evolution. Like giving an actor like 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 15 seconds after they've shot the tele ad to do their digital component. Now it's fully integrated. We know that we need to do it differently.
Yeah, I would agree here. Steven here from Group I think coming from Serbia, which is I think the leading market in terms of growth. I think what happened is that smaller markets in Central and Eastern Europe drew the best lessons from bigger markets, and primarily thanks to large advertisers, large clients who are actually present in all markets, and then they took those lessons and those solutions locally and implemented them.
And how does that leave the local brands' position, Stefan? Do you see them, moving quickly enough to compete in that context?
Oh, absolutely. I think yes. I think I can. When I go to Serbia, for example, I see that a lot of local brands are quickly adopting international practices and really competing. And I agree with Tyson, who said that now it's mobile first, digital first, and TV is definitely there. It's still big. It's I will speak about it a bit later. It's still big, but digital comes in combination very strongly, both local and international clients.
Just on the local side, to add, I think there's significant untapped potential. Right now, many smaller brands or local brands, of course, don't have the budgets to get an agency involved to get professional support. So they are very reliant in digital on self-serve tools. And there are some larger players who have built fantastic tools that are extremely easy to use, even for a non-professional. I think for the entire ad ecosystems, be it on the programmatic side, be it the DSPs, for instance, or the publishers, making things easier to buy and really developing better services and solutions for mid-sized and smaller advertisers, local ecosystem. We should never underestimate.
Daniel, I think.
Oops.
Oh, I think we've lost him.
I think we may have lost Daniel there. I couldn't hear him. So we'll proceed. Can panelists, can you hear me okay?
To move beyond the big.
Daniel's back. Here we go.
Okay. Daniel, we lost you for a moment then. Do you want to just give us a quick summary of that last point?
Apologies. Yes, so the point was simpler user experience on the DSP side, on the publisher side, can ensure that smaller brands or medium-sized brands spend in the local ecosystem.
Yeah, and if I can add, at the beginning, Tyson was talking about the data users and the execution of data. I think what Daniel just said now bring another important piece to the equation, which is the technology. And I can confirm that especially in these rising markets, we have seen the use of the technology, the DSP, the uptake of that in a much higher percentage than what we expected, exactly for the reason Daniel had described.
That's really interesting, Christiana. Thanks. I think one of the other points, just continuing with you a minute, that we wanted to explore was shifting brand spend from TV. So we've talked about brands taking advantage of digital more and a couple of challenges. But do you see more brand advertising spend shifting from other media into digital, and in particular digital display? Is that something that we're seeing more of, do you think?
So before actually seeing the study, I would have said definitely yes. At least from the conversation we are having with the big advertisers, they are telling us that they are moving budget from the traditional medias to online. And there's no doubt that investment is mainly done on video or also on content advertising. At the same time, now looking at the report, we have seen that the other medias, they are almost stable. I think for me the biggest change of the last 18 months has really been seeing how every media is really going digital. If we think what is happening on TV, or the UK is always the leading market, what the national newspapers are doing in terms of going digital, I think it seems that the entire ecosystem is really moving into that direction.
Thanks. And I think then it's a good point to ask Stefan about video and cross-platform video execution. So are you seeing that becoming more simple for clients to execute video across the different platforms?
Yes, we do see that. And I think what Daniel said at the beginning is that social is probably the most significant driver of growth in video, specifically because of rich data sets that social platforms hold. But I would just like to take a step back, and because I think we often speak about online video as a great thing because it grows so fast, and it is true, but it's also good to put it into the perspective that, for example, we should not forget that TV incumbents still command 3/4 of video hours, and some of our analysis indicate that TV occupies 29% of online video hours. However, as Daniel and Alison said, we can see this really strong growth. Clients, I saw this, one of the participants asked the questions about the difference between the level of investment in YouTube and Facebook. I guess you were referring to Facebook in general, but also Facebook Watch, and I think we all understand that YouTube is really objectively leading, and then we also have other big platforms that are there, and they're starting to compete, such as Amazon and its Twitch service, which caters to a very specific audience. We also have Twitter that launched a service that offers brand safe environment on video. However, the issue here with cross-platform is really a problem of measurement. We as the industry, we need to drive better and to get to a single measurement indicator for this cross-platform execution to be more efficient and effective.
I think this is a really interesting point, Stefan, about online video. We always see the growth of YouTube and Facebook video or Facebook Watch, kind of, that's undisputed, and they're of course commanding a growing share of the overall video ecosystem. At the same time, what's often lost in this story is that there are new or smaller or specialist online video platforms which are also growing tremendously strongly, that have extremely interesting audiences for advertisers. You mentioned Twitch, for instance. Gamers is highly sought after demographics that cannot really be reached well and at scale on traditional media. It's a demographic that leaves a large data footprint for targeting, for instance. So that is all tremendously, I think, important to understand in video as well. It's not just the large platforms who are growing. I also agree with your point on measurement, and I think the main issue here is that each, in particular, large players have their own proprietary truths, so their own measurement standards, and it becomes extremely easy to target within one ecosystem, but it's still difficult or near impossible to do it across ecosystems. So kind of to really orchestrate things between different platforms, I think, is harder and a bigger piece of work than to try to harmonize some things between, let's say, TV and the online catch-up portal of the broadcaster. I think in particular the TV world has made some really, really good progress here, based on industry committees, joint standards, etc. And maybe the last point on video is what we're seeing from our customers is an increasing shift away from just paid media to something else. So in our study, of course, we only reflect paid media. And in video, and more broadly in digital, there's a massive trend towards other forms of marketing communication which are not traditional advertising. Think about experience design, for instance. IBM has done lots of acquisitions in that space recently. Or think of direct-to-consumer brands who understand that marketing isn't just banners and videos, but that product fulfillment and supply chain are part of marketing as well, and that product and marketing can't be separated. And I think it's this new mindset which shows the path on how the marketing landscape is really going to evolve in the next couple of years, where paid media is just one component among many and not the primary one anymore.
I think that's a really good point, Daniel, and that leads to questions for us as a trade body, that broader definition of marketing and how we can help people to understand that and indeed measure it. But also I'd like to refer back to the comments on metrics. So at Interact, we published an update on our measurement study. So if you refer back to the IAB Europe website, people can find some latest information on industry thoughts on what KPIs and metrics we should be moving towards. And we're also in the middle of developing an ad effectiveness white paper where we're looking at defining how best to measure ad effectiveness there, and we've got some good case studies and some experts working on that. So if anybody's interested in finding out more about that, then do let myself or Marie-Claire know about that. Okay, so I think we've got about 5 minutes left, and no webinar at the moment is complete without a mention of the dreaded GDPR word, or maybe it's not such a dreaded word anymore. So I was wondering if we could just flip back to Tyson to see if you see any signs, Tyson, of what impact GDPR might be having on digital advertising in terms of planning and execution, or is it too early to tell at this stage?
Well, first of all, thanks a million for giving me this question.
All right, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think realistically right now we're going to see the rise of consent management platforms coming, and there's some really good ones out there. But are there any experts yet? I think an expert is somebody that has honed in a craft over a period of time, that is educated and is experienced. So for me right now, GDPR, it's making people much more responsible. So if we put it in perspective, we've had companies including Drawbridge, Cargo, and Verb, and all of these guys use location data. They've shut up shop. They've left Europe. They've cited GDPR as the main reason behind that, because there's Frankenstein audience models that have been created on the back of absorbing data and information. So as a buyer or a planner, I think you're going to need to know exactly where the data you're using has come from. And this is really where it gets interesting, because I think they're going to be questioning everything and using only data sources that are 100% identifiable. It needs to be that way. You don't want to be the guy or the girl who sticks their head above the trench first, because you're going to take the bullet. So I do believe there are going to need to relay this to their clients or brands. Brands are going to be all over this. They do not want to be the first ones. Nobody wants to be the first ones to investigate over this. It's everybody's worst nightmare right now. So I think realistically, the brands want to have clear oversight on this. And there needs to be accountability. So just as an example, let's say I'm a buyer right now, and I'll go back into, let's say I've got a fast fashion client, or somebody like who's, if we're all familiar with the fast fashion sense, their target audiences that they're going after is 16 to 24-year-olds, right? And if we're starting this off, what do we do in terms of programmatic? Well, what we're probably going to do is look at buying Experian data and use that as our base for the campaign. We're going to utilize census data, and that is hopefully going to be the first step in us being able to identify our 16 to 24-year-old female audience. So this is going to provide us with deterministic match-based, and it's going to be on cookie and device IDs. We're then going to be able to build out on our base with relative confidence that we're hitting our target audience. I could trust this as a source, but where we're going right now is very interesting because we are still going into the unknown. Now, all we need to do, I think, from my point of view anyways, and you know, I'm not an expert on this at all, just for the record. I just think there needs to be due diligence and people need to have their heads screwed on, and they need to verify their data sources they're purchasing. And that is going to make effective campaigns.
And in my opinion, I think what we don't have to forget is that contextual buying is still part of the planning. So what you have described to reach that target audience is, of course, you know, usually where you start. But I've seen buying teams actually in this period of, you know, uncertainty, and when, as you said, people get the learning, the understanding, we see that contextual buying is still important, you know, for the planning team. It's actually those days probably more important. And I just wanted to hear what everybody's thought was about this point.
It's a great point. But how do you actually rationalize that? And I guess what is the next step? So we look at different formats that we're buying. We're buying in different environments. It's how you utilize that data from its initial source that makes it valuable. And I think for me, if you're buying contextual, fine, but you're going to have to be a little bit, I think the buyers are going to have to be cleverer these days than maybe even what they were 3 or 4 weeks ago, in my personal opinion.
I think there's going to be a massive move to contextual, but many people think it's either contextual or targeting. And the targeting is data and that contextual is without data. I see the future of contextual advertising actually being reliant on data as well, but not on consumer data, but on content data. Some in the video world, some broadcasters, for instance, are starting with that. Where information about the program, about what's being shown, what's on, and information about what ad would fit really well with sports content, for instance, that is going to drive creative decisions. So you will have a data-enabled contextual world where data about the program environment, about the content, and about content and messaging fit will co-determine how the message is created. So I think it's actually a new golden era for data, which we haven't thought about enough because we've always associated data with people data, but it can be metadata about many different things. And that, I think, is itself a form of creativity that we need to push forward more as an industry.
Yeah, I can agree to a certain extent, but also disagree to a certain extent as well, for a simple reason that even if you want to do things such as I don't know, frequency capping, you still need to access somebody's device, and you still need some kind of a legal ground to do that. So whereas I think I agree with you, Daniel, with your first point, saying that contextual targeting may not, what did you say, doesn't require, it does not exclude fully the use of data, yes, but it does include some use of data, and that data sometimes may be personal. So I don't think that consent management platforms and other things are going to go away. They're here to stay, and but however, I do agree that we are probably going to see much more innovative solutions around contextual advertising.
So thanks, Stefan. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. That was a really interesting conversation, and definitely plenty of food for thought on a variety of topics for us to take forward. I was just going to invite our panelists just to give us a final wrap up to come up with a soundbite in terms of 3 words to describe what you think that digital advertising will look like in a couple of years' time. And I'm going to go to Christiana on that first. Have you had chance about that, Christiana?
I would say mobile consumer first.
Mobile consumer first, that's a good one. Stefan?
I would say fully measurable, thriving, and responsible / brand safe.
That's more than 3 words, Stefan.
And I would add hopefully.
Brands, exactly. Hopefully, that's a good addition. Tyson, how about you?
The Minority Report. Great film, good book, nice read, interesting. Tom Cruise is the actor, stars in it. It's all about how I believe advertising is going to effectively target people in the future.
Wow. Okay, and Daniel, yours to wrap up with your last summary.
I'd say accountable, not transparent, beyond paid media, and outcome driven.
Great. Well, I hope that's given everybody some really useful ideas to think about today. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for participating, Christiana, Tyson, Stefan and Daniel, for that great presentation. All the attendees are able to download the IAB report from our website, watch and share the webinar report recording when that comes through to you. And there's a survey at the end of this webinar, so if you would like to provide your feedback, please do so at the end of the webinar. We've also had other questions come through during the webinar that we haven't been able to deal with today. So if we just flip to the next slide, you can see our contact details there, so that we can answer any questions that come up. So there's myself, Marie-Claire and Daniel, and thanks very much for joining us for this webinar today. We always are pleased to hear your feedback, and thanks again to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.